I've got to tell a story before I introduce him.
Mr. Ralph Hall, ladies and gentlemen. Great America. I'm getting a foxhole with him any day. We had about 434 more like him in Congress. Everything would be good in Washington, D.C. Ralph was right about one thing, is that he and my daddy were great and good friends. Matter of fact, I called Dad before I just got here and shared with him I was going to be on the stage with you. He said to tell you, howdy, Ralph. We came here every summer. The first 300-acre piece of land that my daddy rented back in the 1950s, Mr. A.W. Adams from Sulphur Springs, Texas owned. And every summer after we got laid by, we loaded up and drove from just north of Abilene, Texas to Sulphur Springs. Y'all didn't know you were such a metropolitan area. Bright lights, running water, y'all had it all over here. It was a wonderful place. And this old courthouse that is a great reminder of what freedom and liberty and justice is all about. It's here in those days, it's here today. These are the reminders for all of us about what we're doing here today. Saying thank you. Thank you to men and women who have sacrificed greatly to come to the defense of our freedoms. Some paying the ultimate sacrifice so that we could be here on this beautiful July evening, celebrating our freedoms. It's good to be with people who understand that the shenanigans that are going on in Washington, D.C., these misguided attempts at social engineering, the threats to our freedom, the threats to our finances, the threat to our children's future, I hope and pray will be futile, that they will not be successful, because Americans have stood up for that type of issue and said no. Amen. Listen, I mean, folks that may be listening all across the country, we're not here to preach rebellion tonight. We're not here to preach subversion tonight. We're not here to preach insurrection, but to express our love for this great country, to discuss how to keep it from running off the cliff. We're part of a growing effort, a growing movement, if you will, across this country. Sensible people from every race and creed and political persuasion, who just cannot abide the ongoing assault on our values that made our nation great, the freedoms that have set us apart. Being here this evening proves something to me. It proves that you understand the importance of liberty, but you also love this country so much that you're willing to take a stand for it. Raise your voice in defense of those freedoms. Are there some patriots out there tonight? Hopkins County. You know, there was a time in our nation's there was a time in our nation's history when people like you, patriots, they had to disguise themselves, to sneak around in Boston, if you will, cities up in the Northeast, in the dark. They risked their lives in order to send a message about unfair taxation. And I'm proud to be able to stand here 236 years later in the brightness of a beautiful Texas evening and show our faces to the world and tell the truth about the state of our nation. You know what? And I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. The times are tough in America. When you look at our current economy, and there are problems that aren't going to fix themselves. And I'm at a loss. Ralph, I'm at an absolute loss how Washington and this administration can justify the approach that they're taking. You know, if anyone here is starting a business, any one of these small businesses around the square, if you think that you can borrow your way to prosperity, that you can spend your way to prosperity, you might want to consider taking a course in Economics 101. And I suggest the same class for all the people in Washington, D.C. And they might also want to take a refresher course on the United States Constitution. Our liberties would be a whole lot safer if those folks in Washington were sitting in a classroom learning a little Economics 101 instead of rampaging through the halls of Congress, overturning our rights one after another, making choices that I got to think would leave our founding fathers scratching their head about what's going on up there. Our founding fathers put limits on the federal government for a reason. There is a reason that the Constitution has the clear constraints. And the reason is because they saw what the British monarchy was doing. They were very concerned about this dangerous example that this faraway monarchy. They understood what happens when government goes unchecked. Those limits that are so clearly laid out in the Constitution aren't slowing down those folks in Washington, D.C., though, folks. They are continuing to erode our rights, waste our tax dollars, bury the next generation under a mountain of debt. And I think it's well past time to halt this endless intrusion into our lives. Put a stop to this out-of-control spending. Restore our commitment to a shared set of values. I'm talking about values that were forged on the anvil of experience. Values that form the nucleus of our nation. Values that our fighting men and women have died for all around this country and on this globe. I'm talking about life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. I'm talking about the uniquely American freedom to plot one's own course, pursue one's own dream, choose the right light bulb that you want, not just the one that happens to be the favorite of the president. The federal government has its hand way too far in our pockets, its nose way too far in our business, and its fingers too deep in its own ears to hear what the American people are trying to tell it. It's time for the federal government to be less intrusive, more responsive to the wishes of the conservative citizens of this country. You see, we know what route you need to take to success. I told them I'm an animal science major from Texas A&M University, but I understand how to run a government. You keep the taxes low. You don't spend all the money. You keep the regulatory climate fair and balanced. You have a legal system in place that doesn't allow people to oversue each other. You keep an educated workforce in place. And then you get out of the way and let the private sector do what the private sector does.